Welcome to Veterans Archives, where we preserve the stories of our nation's heroes in their own words and their own voices. Today is Thursday, March 9th, 2023, and I am here with William Gilchrist Anderson.
Yes.
And so, Dr. Anderson, we're going to just start out from the beginning. If you could tell me when and where you were born.
I was born in Americus, Georgia. My parents, they were probably as good as any parents could be and provided as many opportunities as they could for me and my brother and my sister. There were three of us born of the matrimony of John Daniel Anderson and Emma Jean Anderson. One thing that I remember most especially about my mother was she had barely got out of high school. But once she got married to a man who finished high school, and actually he had started college at Morehouse in Atlanta, Georgia, which was the premier male-dominated college for African Americans in the world. Morehouse College, well known. But anyway, I was born of that couple. My mother, though, felt as though if she was going to be able to do the best into the future, she needed to get an education. She was born of parents she never knew. If you read the book that was written by Clinton's wife, It Takes a Village, and my mother said that I never knew my natural birth parents, but I was reared by 6 or 7 aunts and uncles. It takes a village? Yes. It took a village to raise her, and what a wonderful woman they raised.
Well, I want to ask you something. I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to ask you this. Why was your mother raised by a village? Why didn't she know her parents?
Because she was one generation removed from slavery, and slave masters were only interested in how much work they could get out of you. And they even would trade you for another slave in another part of the town or another country, or they would somehow teach you how to pick the cotton, shake the peanuts, or whatever they needed in the farm. And of course, the primary industry in the time she was born was farming. And in Moultrie, Georgia, where she was born, we think, the primary industry there was farming. So they were interested in, can she pick cotton? Can she shake peanuts? Those are the things that they needed. But my mother was beyond that in her thoughts and said, I think I need an education if I'm going to help my children to get a better education than we've been able to provide for them. So she made a commitment when my sister and my mother got together. My mother said, when your sister starts school, I'm going to go back to college that I never went to except to walk by to see where it was. So when my sister then started elementary school, and she was 6 years old, my mother then started college. And she had to go to college in Savannah, Georgia, which was a couple of 100 miles from Moultrie, Georgia, where she was born and reared. But somehow or another, she just got that motivation. I'm going to get an education, but I can't do it until my youngest child, that's my sister, is now able to do some things for herself. So she put my sister in elementary school, starting in the first grade. We did not have a kindergarten. And she said each summer, when my sister was at home, could be taken care of by the other members of the family or neighbors, she went to school. 20 years later, she got a college degree from Savannah State College. That was my mother. She set the example. She was the primary motivator. She then could come to us, 3 children, I had a brother and a sister, and say, you're going to get an education because that's the only way you're going to be able to get anywhere in this world. She was so motivating. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that my father was not, but anytime when we were in college and we really need an extra $10, we knew who to go to. It was mother, our mother.
So before we get too far in this, though, Dr. Anderson, can we talk a little bit about your father?
Yes, my father was born in Cordele, Georgia, and his mother was one generation removed from slavery, and she never wanted to talk about her life as a slave. Her name was Mary, but half the women in the world were born Mary, and the half of the men in the world were named John. So my grandmother, that was my father's mother, her name was Mary, and she lived in Cordele, Georgia, and she did not have any formal education. But my father would send us to Cordele in the summer months when we were not in school to get exposed to her, that was our grandmother, and to learn how she managed to survive slavery and to be able to give 2 children an education. My father had a sister that both of them wound up going to college. The first time in the history of the family that children of a slave, one generation removed from slavery, were able to get an education. So my father then, although he never finished college, he went to college. He spent a year or 2 in the Army when he was growing up. And we, his children, were looking at him and said, why would you do that? He felt as though that he had a responsibility to help the Americans get through World War I, not II,
Right.
World War I. And he inspired us with that. Because later, when there was World War II, and the United States now was in the midst of this war between Germany and Japan, it did not mean that we were any different from our parents. Yes, we were now 2 generations removed from slavery, but this was the only home that we knew. And slaves would protect the only home that they knew. So what did I do? By the time I was 16, I pushed my age up and volunteered to go in the Navy.
Well, I got to ask you this question, though, because it sounds to me, so this is different, because what I usually hear when I talk to people, especially African American, is that these last couple of generations, they were the first generation to be educated. But your family saw the value of education way before any of that. And so what was your parents' response to you joining the Navy and not necessarily going off to college?
My parents saw something in me that many people could not see. I had a sense of responsibility to protect what I had. Yes, 2nd generation from slaves, but it was the only home, the only family I had ever known. And when my country was attacked by the Germans and or the Japanese, I felt a responsibility to protect what I had. Slaves, yes, we were slaves, but the only home that I knew was Americus, Georgia, where I grew up, went to elementary school, and my mother did not know her parents, but I do know that she was raised by uncles and aunts in Moultrie. And she would send us to Moultrie from Americus in the summertime so she could learn how they survived. And would you believe each one of those 5 or 6 aunts and uncles also recognized the value of education, and they encouraged it rather than saying, you don't need that. No. And they motivated us to go on beyond elementary school, beyond high school. The high school only went to 11th grade. Even further, they would be encouraging us to the extent that they would provide what they could, whether finances or whether food or whether the job in the summer. But the whole family got behind raising our mother. And our father set the example when he went to college. We don't know whether he ever finished college or not. We know he was in the Army, World War I. Right. But he also went to college, at Morehouse College, for a year, maybe a little longer. But he do sensed the value and encouraged his 3 children to seek a better education. So Anderson said, I don't want just an education, I want to be a doctor. You want to be a what? I want to be a doctor. Nobody in the history of the family had been a doctor or a nurse, nothing like that. Slaves were not doctors or nurses.
Right.
But I did get the motivation from my parents, both of whom went to college. Whether they finished their college is less significant than the fact they went to college and encouraged their children to go to college. So I got kind of eager. World War II was well on its way. I was approaching 16 years of age. I'd already pushed my age up to get a driver's license. You couldn't get a driver's license before your age of 12. I think I pushed it up a year or 2. But to get into the Navy, I pushed my age up to 17 and volunteered. And I was interviewed by the recruitment officer in Macon, Georgia, and he said, "What branch of the Navy do you want to get in?" Now, mind you, why Navy? Well, I thought the Navy was pretty clean from what I'd seen in pictures. Right. That's why I wanted to go to the Navy. I didn't want to go in the Army and get shot at like they got shot at. So I said, I want to go into the Navy. He said, "Well, what branch of the Navy do you want to be in?" I said, "Well, I just know Navy. Clean white uniform, and they always clean on ships. Tell me something about them, because I don't know anything about them." He said, "Well, there's a seaman's branch, and there was the steward's branch." I said, "Well, I don't know anything about either one. Tell me about them." Well, the steward's branch took care of the captain's quarters. They cooked his meals. They cleaned his... I said, "Stop right there." And I said this to the recruitment officer. Here I was 16 years old. "I don't care if it's shoveling horse shit. I do not want to join the Navy to be somebody's servant. I've been doing that all my life. My parents did all that life." Right. Whatever the other one is, seaman. So I was motivated to become a seaman, not knowing what the future would hold. Little did I recognize that, yes, they permitted me to join the Navy, and they sent me to seaman's school it was in Illinois. Great Lakes.
Great Lakes, Illinois.
Great Lakes, yes. And I went there because there were only two branches to the Navy for blacks. You're either going to be a seaman or you're going to be a steward. So stewards went to, I think it was Virginia or somewhere, to learn how to cook and serve, wash dishes. No, I said, I want the other one. I don't care what it is. So I went there and I went in training for 6 weeks. At the end of my training period at Great Lakes, and incidentally, I did not recognize it at the time, but my company at Great Lakes was the last all-black company to go into the United States Navy. The very last. I did not recognize that at the time, but historically, you can prove it, we were the last. So after 6 weeks of training, we all could go home for, 2 weeks, I think, to recover from the training. But while I was home in recovery, I developed tonsillitis. And a doctor in America, we had doctors that would take care of things like that. He said, "Well, you're not fit to travel." So he called the doctor back at Great Lakes and says, "We've got William Anderson here, and he's a seaman way down, first class or below, and he is not able to travel now. He got a high fever, and he's sick." So the doctor, I never knew the doctor in Great Lakes, but the doctor said to the doctor in Americas, "Keep him until he's able to travel, then send him on back up here to Great Lakes." By the time I got back to Great Lakes, my company had already been assigned as CBs. Those were the construction guys. I was so happy I missed that. They had already shipped out as CBs, so I was there in Great Lakes, only the last remaining black in the last all-black company to go into the Navy. That's a part of history that probably you're not going to be able to get that in a recorded book of history of the Navy. Right. But I got back there with no assigned duties. So then the commanding officer of the training base said, "We will put you on the next ship to Japan." Thank you. And he did, but at independent duty. When I got on the ship, I had no idea what this was all about, because I had never been a seaman and never been a steward, anything like that. But at least I knew I was not going to be a servant. So when we got as far as Hawaii, we got off the ship there, waiting for the next ship to go to the Philippine Islands. 2 weeks later, I was on a ship, part of the ship company and the ship fleet itself, the captain of which was Bull Connor. Mm-hmm. He is historically there, Bull Connor. He was commanding officer of the 7th Fleet of the United States Navy. I was the only black in that whole fleet because I was a seaman and not a steward. The others went on ships as servants.
Right.
So I was on that, and halfway there, because we stopped in Philippine Islands for a couple of weeks, but on the way to Philippine Islands, Bull Connor got on the PA system to announce, "We need hospital people to work in the islands of the Philippine Islands because we have not even got an established hospital, let alone clinics for the patients when they get sick, for the SEALs when they get sick. So he said, anyone in this group that has any background at all in medicine, report to me. Well, I went up there with my brazen self and said, well, I had 2 years of pre-med. That'll do. Because we will send you to hospital corpsman school when you get there. I was the only black in that group. The others came from medical school, prep schools. But
let me ask you this question.
Yes.
Not to interrupt, but actually 2 questions.
Yes.
So the first question is, what kind of things did you do on the ship when you headed to the Philippines before you went to corpsman school? And then we can know that. I do have one other question I'd like to ask.
I had no assigned duties on board ship. I was the only black on board that ship in the 7th Fleet, the only one. I did not realize that at front. And I did find out pretty soon, though, that if you're not in the ship's company, and certainly ship's company officer, you do not have access to freshwater showers. So after I had been on that ship for a few days and I began to smell myself, I sneaked into the officer's quarters and took a freshwater shower. And I was reported to Bull Connor's office, and he says, okay, you have done that, so you're going to have to go and work it out. And they put me down in the hold of the ship with a paintbrush and a pan of gray. Everything on the board ship was gray. So for the next week or 2, I was painting in the bow of the ship. Did I like that? Oh, heck no. But that was the penalty that I got for taking a freshwater shower. But once I got to the Philippine Islands, because mind you, everybody who ever went to the Philippine Islands on a ship would tell you, oh, I went to Manila. No, hell no, everybody didn't go to Manila. Manila was the capital. It was the biggest city in the whole Philippine Islands. There were a whole lot more small islands, and it was on the island Luzon. So we only stopped there, and I looked at it, but I could not get off the ship. I was taken with the other crew to the Leyte Gulf. This is in the middle of the Philippine Islands. The atomic bomb had been dropped just a few weeks earlier at Subic Bay. And of course, you couldn't even go anywhere near that. I think for 20 years after that you could. But anyway, then the ship that I was on was sent down to what a group of small islands, and there were several of those in the Philippine Islands, and they dropped me off in the Leyte Gulf and dropped me off at one of the islands. There was Tacloban, Mindanao, Samar. But when I got off the ship, they immediately started looking for, again, anyone with a background in medicine. I just said, well, I got 2 years of pre-med, that's good enough. They sent me to hospital corpsman school, the only black out of a class of 12 or 15 that was sent to hospital corpsman school in the Philippine Islands because they had no doctors.
And I want to ask you this question.
Yes.
Because it's really important to me anyway.
Yes.
What was it like? What did it feel like to be the only black person in that class? How did you feel about
Would you believe that it did not bother me? I did not even stop to think about that except for one occasion. I was attending the sick servicemen in what you call the hospital was nothing more than a Quonset hut that they put cots in. Right. But there was a ruckus down in the places where they were living in these huts. And a guy that I was with me had been in my class going through hospital corpsman school. When he heard about the ruckus, and some guy had come up there to report what was going on, this man said this: what were they, niggers or gooks? Now that stuck with me. What were they, niggers or gooks? Because they regarded the Filipinos as gooks. Yes, that stuck with me. And I remembered that. And I did not like that. And both of us, mind you, were in the Navy. I was the only black in the hospital corpsman school. I had to take care of him when he got penicillin because he would go out with some of the girls who perhaps had gonorrhea. But I'm saying that I don't even think he had a second thought about what he was saying. And it was something that was not readily accepted by the son he was saying it to.
Well, and words have meaning. Whether we want them to or not, words have meanings.
I think he grew up hearing that, and that was the way he was brought up. But anyway, I managed to put some of that aside. I said, well, I will show you how I will respond to that by exceeding him in what he's trying to do. And yes, after I stayed there for a few months, I got promoted from hospital apprentice third class to hospital apprentice second class. And by the time I was sent back to the United States, I had been promoted, the first and only African American to be promoted to hospital apprentice first class. And I do have that conviction. I got that in my card now because it was amazing to me to get to be a hospital apprentice first class, only 2 years of pre-med, mind you, and I was treated as a primary care physician. Hospital apprentice first class were treated as physicians internship and just one grade below becoming a medical officer. So although when I volunteered to go into the Navy, I did not anticipate that I would have that kind of opportunity to be selected by Bull Halsey to go to a hospital apprentice school as the only black, and eventually, after serving there for a year and a half, get the opportunity as I was being discharged, I've been promoted to hospital apprentice first class. And as a number of us, we were given the opportunity to re-enlist. I said, no, thank you. A couple years was enough. And I didn't. I went back home and I got ready to go back to college.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's just an amazing success story all in itself. I can't imagine the amount of pride you must have felt going home, knowing what you had accomplished. So you got home, and so what happens next?
I said to them, my parents, I need to go back and finish college, and then I started applying to medical schools. And I laughingly say, I applied to every medical school in the United States and foreign countries. Some of them denied my application because I was African American. There were others because they never heard of the college I went to, Fort Valley State. And at the time, I did not have a college degree. A college degree was not required to get into medical school or law school or engineering. But I had 2 years of foundation. And before I could get accepted into a medical school, I said I had to do something. And what caused me to look at the curriculum in the College of Mortuary Science, I don't know. But somehow or another, this is part of the Atlanta University system. And Atlanta University was sort of like, if you were to see the center of African American education in the United States, where would it be? Atlanta, Georgia. That's where we had some of the best, Martin Luther King. So I'm saying I didn't know anything about what Martin Luther King was going to become, but I looked at the curriculum for mortuary science, which was affiliated and had the same teachers as Morehouse. So I had graduated from the College of Mortuary Science in Atlanta, and the college had been contacted by a funeral home in Montgomery, Alabama, the Loveless Funeral Home. And I did not realize how fortuitous that was because I accepted the position because I needed the job. I had a wife and a couple of children on the way. And when I got there, the man who was owner of the funeral home, it was one of those that was in the family. And that was a lot of funeral homes in the country like that. His name was Loveless. And while he did not have any formal education himself, he recognized the value of it. And he said to me, I want you to go on out there to Alabama State College and bring me back your schedule of classes. We will assign you working at the funeral home so that you do not miss any of your classes. Damn, here was a man who had limited education himself, but he saw the value of education, and he saw in me something that could help him advance. So I was very happy to have him. Loveless, he was quite a playboy in his day. And he had a red convertible Buick, and he put bull horns up on the fenders, and he took great pride and joy in driving through the neighborhoods, blowing that horn, and with the top down. But on the other hand, he encouraged me. He said, go to this was out to Montgomery, go to Alabama State, get your schedule, and we will assign you work around that so you don't miss going to school. What a man. Limited education himself, a real playboy, a real drunkard, but he saw in me a future that he did not have. What I did not know at the time was, you would never guess who one of my classmates was that became a leader in the civil rights movement, Ralph David Abernathy. We were classmates at Alabama State. I didn't know him. He did not know me. I got to know him only as a student at Alabama State, and he drove a small car. I did not have a car at all. I had a motor scooter. I had a wife, and now one child and one on the way. So that person, Ralph David Abernathy, became one of the leaders in the civil rights movement. He and I became friends when we both were in college. I did not know him from Adam before that time, and I only used him, I say, but it was mutual because he loved my scooter. I needed his coupe car. But that friendship developed before there was a civil rights movement, which caused me to say frequently, and I'm talking to those who have not had the same experience, make friends where you can, when you can. The friendship that I developed with Rev. David Abernathy lasted until his death, as the friendship that I developed with Martin Luther King when I married a lady whose brother was his best friend in high school. What? You can't make these things up, people. You can't plan your life like that, which is why I say make friends where you can, when you can. You never know.
So I want to ask you a question
Yes.
on that. We see these men as leaders in the civil rights movement, great men. I mean, no question. They changed not only our country, but they really changed the world.
All the world. They were
Yeah.
recognized all over the world, yes.
But I want to know, what was it like to know them just as your friend?
That was what that word you just used. If you can define friendship as unconditionally you want to maintain a relationship with that person, that's friendship. So when I told Martin Luther King, why don't you just shut up, when he was a senior in high school in Atlanta, I said, why don't you just shut up? An ordinary person might say, well, you can go to hell. You know, I'm not doing this. But it did not. A friendship does not end because you might have a difference of opinion on some issues. And you may make him a friend because he was a classmate that you did not even know by name or looks. But you treated him as though you had known him most of your life.
So,
And of course,
I just want to.
yes,
You told Martin Luther King to shut up.
I told him to shut up. Why don't you just shut up?
Really?
And you would have thought that would be the end of a friendship. No. If anything, it cemented the friendship because he knew I could tell him honestly how people are regarding him. So when I got into the Albany movement and I called for him to come down there, he did not hesitate. All right, Andy, when you want me to come? Because we had that kind of relationship. And he knew I got in deep trouble starting a movement in Albany, Georgia. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. Right. So I'm saying friendships can be enduring if they are solidly built on foundations of friendship where I don't want anything from you except you. Become a part of me and what I'm doing. So I'm saying it was several years later, I'm talking when I left Montgomery, that I realized, damn, my classmate, he was sitting 3 seats behind me, became a leader in the civil rights movement because make friends where you can, when you can. You never know what the future holds. So when I finished college, yes.
Okay, so that's what we're going to get to. So I want to find out what happens to William Anderson. You go to college, or you're working at this mortuary. By the way, never heard of a Playboy mortuary owner before, so that's very interesting. But so you have this life experience. So what happens after graduation?
At graduation from high school or college or the mortuary science school, which one?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Oh, well, we know that you went into the Navy. So let's talk about what happens after your graduation from the mortuary science school.
All right. After graduation, I then my father, who was a district manager of the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company, one of only two significant insurance companies that were owned and operated by African Americans, because Mutual of Omaha would not insure a black because their life expectancy was too short for them to get enough money. But the North Carolina Mutual was one of the major, it was probably the only one east of the Mississippi River, and my father happened to be a district manager. And my father was sort of like me. He made friends easily. One of the friends that he made was Willie Joe Reese, the only osteopathic physician of color in the entire southern United States. I'm going to say again, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, this is in the record books. These things happen. But what I say to people, especially children who are growing up in high school and college, make friends. So Willie Joe Reese and my father were close friends. They were fraternity brothers. And my father said to him, my son wants to be a doctor, but he'd been turned down by every medical school in the country because, number one, he's colored. Number two, he went to a college that's not recognized. Fort Valley State College only had 300 students. So I'm saying that he did not have a chance to get into Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all those medical schools. And Meharry was one of those that was predominantly black. So I'm saying that to Willie Reese, my father was saying he wants to get into medical school, he can't get in because of his color, or maybe he went to Fort Valley State where he was not recognized. Then Willie Reese said, I can help him to get in to a college of osteopathy. And my dad said, well, I don't know what that is, but you are practicing what he wants to do. Willie Reese was a very well-known primary care physician in Albany, Georgia, the only DO in the entire southern United States, the only one. Again, make them when you can.
Right.
So my father said that to me. I said, well, I'll meet him. So I went to meet him, and I watched what he was doing. And I had said, no, I don't want to be one of those DOs, one of those cracks. I want to be a real doctor. You know, I can give shots and write prescriptions. And my dad said, well, just come up, you dummy. You know, just come and meet him. And I was obedient to my father. And when I met Willie Joe Reese, I said, I came out there telling him, I said, well, he's doing everything I ever wanted to do as a doctor. I only knew African-American physicians were primary care. They were family practice. There were no surgeons and neurologists and all those. And I said, that's just what I want to do. To me, family practice was the only thing that doctors really were needed in most of the country. I said, that's what I want to do. I told you that. So Willie Joe Reese said, it's, again, coincidental. He had been on the faculty at Des Moines Still College of Osteopathy. Wait a minute. He's a DO, yeah. On the faculty, yeah. How did he get on the faculty? They needed a biochemist. And he had graduated from a college in New York that went kaflooey because they did not maintain his certification. So he could not use that degree anywhere except the College of Osteopathic Medicine in Des Moines, Iowa. The dean, his name is John B. Shoemaker, I'll never forget him. He contacted him and said to him, if you come here and teach biochemistry, because we need a biochemist, if you come and teach biochemistry, in 2 years we'll get you a DO degree. Would you believe that's how he got to become an osteopathic physician?
Kind of a roundabout way, isn't it?
You know, in some quarters, you might say, don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Right.
but I'd say, but don't prejudge the opportunities that come your way and you decide, is this going to be beneficial for me or not? So when he could not get a degree from Middlesex Medical School in New York, and of course there were a lot of schools like that, and so he could get a license to practice in some states, because Georgia was the only state that recognized the osteopathic degree when he graduated from Des Moines. But he went back to practice in Albany, and yes, he could practice family medicine. I said to my dad, well, that's all I ever wanted to be. I didn't know there were neurologists or radiologists. I just wanted to be a regular family doctor. Well, Joe Reese just called John Shoemaker and said, this boy is the son of one of my best friends. Would you take him? Well, you got to be examined. I went up there to Des Moines with some anticipation, some expectation, but I went anyway, and they did the entrance exam prior to even considering me for admission. It was a one-day exam. The Ohio Reading Comprehension, Minnesota Multiphasic. Can you imagine that 70 years ago? I'll never forget them because those are the entrance exams for Des Moines State College of Osteopathy. I took the questions, I took the answers, and I was accepted that same day. All one day.
They were able to score that test in one day?
One day.
Wow.
They made a decision whether they were going to keep me or not in one day because I satisfactorily passed the two certifying or qualifying examinations that everybody had to take to get in there. I was a little bit smart. I mean, I was,
Yeah, you learned a few things in your life, didn't you?
And I had been to Montreal Science School. I'd got a college degree, so it's not like I was just walking in off the street with no education. No, so I passed those and I was accepted. I never looked back. I went back home and packed my things, and I said to my wife, and I got 2 children by then, I says, we don't have that much money, but you can come up and visit with me, or I can come and visit with you at Christmas, at Easter, and summer. And she said, I don't think so. So when I got there, and there had only been 2 African Americans in the class ahead of me, and there was one lady in Des Moines who would look at us and how much we needed an opportunity to keep my family together, because she saw me. She gave me a room in a rooming house that she had, where she had 4 or 5 other families in this 4-room house. But anyway, we kind of get crowded there, but you ignore that when you say, well, I got to have a place to stay.
Right.
So she let me rent a room. But after I'd been there 2 or 3 days, she said she wanted to have a conversation with me, because she says, you are not going to ever finish that medical school without your family. I had a wife and 2 children. And so she says, what we'll do is we'll move you to a big room, and we will partition this room, so that'll be the sitting room, that'll be the dining room, that'll be the kitchen. One big room, and you can share a bathroom with 2 or 3 other families on this floor. Well, listen, I was eager to get into medical school here. I was eager to get there, even if it meant I had to share a bathroom with 2 or 3 other families on the same floor. But I was able to have my wife and 2 children come up to Des Moines, and she said, I noticed the difference.
Yeah, family makes all the difference, I think.
Yeah. You cannot make it. If you got a family that you care about, you're not going to get very far being 1,000 miles away from them and seeing them maybe at Christmas and maybe at Easter, and that's it. No. She said, you are not going to graduate from this school without your family.
Now, before we go any further in
Yes.
this story, how did you meet your wife?
She was a student at Fort Valley. And mind you, I had been in the Navy for a couple of years, and when I came out, I went back to Fort Valley, hopefully to get a college degree. I was out on the campus. It was a beautiful campus. Fort Valley State is just south of Macon, Georgia, about 20 miles south of Macon. Beautiful campus and an oval. And I was out there chit-chatting with one of my classmates, and I saw this beautiful lady walking across the campus. I looked up and said, oh, wow. And she was a beautiful lady. I want to meet her. I said, well, I know her friends, so I can introduce you. I was introduced to her on campus at Fort Valley State. And after we had been dating each other periodically, I finally asked her to marry me. And she got one of her classmates who lived in Macon, which was only 26 miles away. Can we come up there and get married by you? Yes. So I got married to her while I was just out of the Navy, 3rd year of college, and went up to Macon, and we got married and been there for 65 years. Mind you, could not afford a honeymoon. So 50 years later, I said, you know, I didn't give you a honeymoon when we got married. And we went to Jamaica. And we had one of those 2-week things down there. And I invited my friends and her friends to come down there and join us for a week. that was the honeymoon. It took 50 years to get there, but she got it, and it would be memorable. She finally got the honeymoon that she deserved.
Well, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That really is. And you know, I think the cool thing about having that honeymoon so late in life is that you got to have your friends there with you, right? The people who
And I
matter
did.
in your life.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to Des Moines, Iowa now.
Okay.
Your family's coming up to stay with you, and you're headed into osteopathic school.
And the dean, his John B. Shoemaker, he recognized that I had some background educational opportunities and experiences that they needed. One of them was they needed an anatomist because the anatomist that they had, his name was Stanley Demetrius Marianus. We called him the glad ass from Mass. He was a major in the United States Army Medical Corps, but not a doctor. And he didn't know one medicine from another. But he was chairman of the anatomy department at the college. So mind you, he was so impressive, spoke so impressively, but didn't know A from a bullfrog. And he then, when a student would ask a question of him about anatomy, Andy, he called me, Andy, show him the vena cava, because he didn't know where it was himself, because the student would ask him questions about anatomy. I knew anatomy. I had taught anatomy at Montreal Science, so I knew that. But he was impressive. You did not know him, don't ask him any anatomical questions. He impressed you. He was a retired major in the Army. So I was able to keep a job as his assistant in anatomy, so that paid part of my tuition. And then there was a radio station in Des Moines that never had a black disc jockey. And there was a program one day a week at this radio station. I think we called it Quit'em or something like that. But the name is not important. The important thing was that the owner his name was Weber, and I won't forget him either. I went to Weber because I had heard on the radio station that he had 1 hour, one day a week of ethnic music. Black, Hispanic, country western, boom, boom, boom. 15-minute segments. It made no money. So I went to him because I had done some work in Atlanta in a radio station. Maybe I could interject that parenthetically because while I was in Atlanta going to Montreal Science School, I was also a member of Wheat Street Baptist Church, which was one of the premier churches in the city. And in the meantime, there was a choir at the church that I was going to, Wheat Street Baptist Church. I always remember that. And we were singing on Sunday mornings, and I was singing in the choir because I just like to sing. The program director of the radio station came to meet those of us who were in the choir to say, can any of you read the print, because the announcer that we have probably had a little too much to drink last night and could not come in, so we need somebody to read what part of the program is going on. And I, with my smart self, said, well, yeah, I know how to read. So he said, okay, here it is. Here's the print. I was a radio announcer, just like that. But while I was on that radio station that was played in the afternoons, and the people that heard it, one of them at least, his name was Allie Pat. Don't ask me what that meant for. But he needed someone to be on radio with him because he had 1 hour every afternoon, Monday through Friday, and he could not do it all by himself. He heard me speaking for the choir on a Sunday morning in a radio station. And he came to me and said, would you be interested in going to radio? I'm like, I don't know anything about radio. I've never done it. Well, that's all right. We just heard you read. That's enough. We want you to read the script. That's where I got involved in radio. So now, degree in Montreal Science, experience in radio. Now I'm in Des Moines. They never had a ethnic music hour on that radio station, ever. It was 15-minute segments, one day, 1 hour a week. Country western, shackles. And so I went to Weber and I says he was going to take that off the air because it wasn't making any money.
Right.
I said, I can do that program for you. He said, yeah, but that's not making any money. I said, tell you what, let me do the program, and if I don't sell some ads and you don't make some money, don't pay me. Are you nuts? Yeah, a little bit. But I want that opportunity. He said, all right, kid, we'll try it for a month. So that radio station that was 1 hour, 1 day a week of mixed ethnic music, it went to every night, 4 hours, 5 nights a week. And who? He gave it to me.
Be careful of what you ask for, right?
Right.
That's a lot of work.
Right. But I could do it. I went to school during the day. I taught anatomy during the day, getting my DO degree so I could practice medicine in Georgia. But yes, I also didn't need sleep. I needed more opportunities so I could make some money to take care of my wife and children because they had come up to Des Moines to stay with me because the landlady said, you're not going to make it without your family. She
probably had a lot of wisdom.
Huh?
That landlady probably had a lot of wisdom.
She did. Well, I guess all she had to do was look at me pacing the hall at night, and she knew that that's not going to make it. Right. So now I had to be the assistant to the anatomist because he didn't know one end from the other. Now I got a radio program 4 nights a week, 8 to 12. I was it. And mind you, I had to also be the engineer, the announcer, the engineer, and the programmer for that 4 hours every night, Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday morning, because he had a country western segment there, and when the country western announcer could not be there, he called me. I did that also. So was there anything I did not do, would not do, or could not do to get through medical school? You name it, and I did it. But 4 years later, I got my degree. Now I need to get an internship. Before you get an internship, you have to have an externship, which is in the 4th year of medicine. I had gone to the dean and said, Dean, I have been trying to get an assignment at a hospital for those rotations, and they won't take me. The Flint Hospital, it was called Flint Osteopathic Hospital, was rated as the best in the profession. They had never had a black. And his name, I will think of his name in a minute. The administrator of that hospital, he was contacted directly by the dean, Shoemaker. And he says, Anderson, I want you to know that he's black. Well, we never had a black doctor on the staff, an intern. But Shoemaker said, but you don't understand. He is a very good student. He's a hard worker. He's really ambitious, so he can do a good job for. I don't care. But Shoemaker was able to convince the administrator of that hospital, try me out for a month. I went there, opened doors, so much so that I was able to go back there for externship. And when I graduated, I even go there for internship. So I'm saying that there were those who did not give blacks an opportunity because they didn't know any. Or the ones they knew were just on the farm picking cotton, so they didn't know anything about advanced education. But when Shoemaker convinced the administrator of the hospital they'd give me a chance, never looked back. And not only was I able to get through the externship there, I was also able to get the internship there. Then I tried to get the residency in surgery, and that's where the roadblock, because they had the blackball. You know what I'm saying, the blackball? Mm-hmm. One member of that department could block them accepting me. And I did find out later who it was, and I wished him well in hell. But anyway, no, I never got in there as an intern. I was there as an extern. Mm-hmm. But that was enough to get me now a degree. I was able to go back to Georgia and get a license and practiced in Albany until that urge came to me now. I want to really be a surgeon.
Well, before we go there,
yes.
There's a couple of things. One, you knew very early on that you wanted to be a doctor.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So I see that. There's that drive the whole time. Also, a point that's not lost on me is that no matter how good you are at something, you've got to have people in your corner.
Right.
To help remove those roadblocks.
Exactly. Right.
And then finally, I've heard you say so many times, just take a chance on me. And I
Uh-huh.
think the radio station just so greatly illustrates, look, if this doesn't work out, you don't have to pay me a nickel.
Uh-huh.
Just give me a chance and I'll prove to you I can do this. And it just feels like your whole life has kind of been that way.
Right. Don't accept no as the final answer. If it's something that you really want, you know you can do it, don't accept no. Make them an offer they can't refuse. When I said to Weber, let me do this. If I don't make you some money, don't pay me. Are you crazy? Well, yeah, a little bit. But it went from 1 hour, 1 day a week to every night, 4 hours, 5 nights a week. And when I wanted to work on Saturday, I could do that on Saturday also. In other words, it was a matter, what do you want?
Well, and I think about your externship at Flint,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Just give me a month.
Give me a month.
Just give me a month. And you made it through the whole externship.
Yeah. And Shoemaker made that appeal on my behalf. Just let him, I know. Now let me give you an illustration of what I got through in order to convince Shoemaker that I knew how to get along. There was no integration in Des Moines, certainly at the college. The Babe's Pizza Parlor, which was only 2 blocks away, would not serve a black. So I'm saying Des Moines was still racist then. But then, in the middle of the first year, the university, well, the college then had a social function of, drinking wine and dancing. Sandine, I will never forget her name. She was the biochemist at the time. At this social function, the dean had already said to me, there is no integration in Des Moines. You will not be socializing with white females. Sandine was a white female. This was an official hospital function, or college function. She told one of my classmates, go and tell Anderson I want to dance with him. So, oh, crap. I knew the dean had said, we don't have any interracial socializing here. If I tell him, go and tell Sandine, I can't do that, I'm going to flunk biochemistry and I'm thrown out. If I do it, somebody's going to tell the dean who told me don't do that, then I'll be thrown out. What do you want to do? Well, I took another drink of alcohol with orange juice, and I went and danced with Sandine, chairman of the biochemistry department. What happened? Nothing. From that point on, integration was open on campus, and once it got there, it naturally spread. Babe Pizza Parlor, which would not serve a black, all of a sudden. And there were 3 or 4 whites in my class who said them to me. We were in class together, we'd study together. They said, let's do this. This is early on in the first year. If all of us cannot go together to these restaurants like Babe's Pizza Parlor, none of us will go there. And we'll tell all of our classmates, don't go there. Mm-hmm. That was the beginning of the end of desegregating Des Moines. They were not going to throw out the whole class because I danced with Sandine. All of a sudden, the dean said, well, all bets are off. Nothing happened.
All that from one dance.
It didn't take long.
No, not at all.
Just had to see one integrated couple on the dance floor at the college. That was enough to say, and nothing happened to him. He didn't get kicked out. He's a good student. He's leading the class, president of the class. So it must be something better than what we've been doing, because look what we have now. Totally integration.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's go back now. You've graduated, and you got the itch now. You want to be a surgeon.
Right. And because I practiced in Albany for several years in family practice, I always wanted to be a surgeon. So then I started applying for surgical residency. In the history of the osteopathic profession, there had only been one hospital in the United States that accepted a black in the surgical residency program, and that happened to be a suburb of Flint. And the guy's name was, I will think of his name in a little while, but anyway, he had been there as an intern and made such a great reputation for himself as an intern there. His name was Cliff Isaacs. You say, Isaac, that's a Jewish name. Well, it might be, but he got it somehow along the way. But his name is Cliff Isaacs. But he had done an internship there and applied for residency there. And the chairman of the department, John Fardell, was not as racist as the whole community. And he said, well, this is a smart guy, could make a great surgeon, so I'll take him. He took him. The first black to get a residency in Michigan in the osteopathic profession, Cliff Isaacs. Jewish name? No, he was black. So you cannot judge a man by his name.
No, nor by his voice or a lot of other things, right?
And so Fardell became one of my neighbors where I live now, right around the corner from here.
Oh, okay.
And because he had retired, he was probably near 80 years old. But every time we would come together, we would laugh about that because he was chairman of the Department of Surgery, and he was like Shoemaker. I'm not going to prejudge this man because he's black. He took him in that residency program, and he turned out to be an excellent surgeon. And he was one of those hard workers. I don't think he ever went home. He was in that emergency room every day. An excellent surgeon. Unfortunately, he died early, but he made room for those who would come after him because there was no longer a question of what color is it, whether you're going to take him or not based on what his color is. No, he set the standard. Cliff Isaacs.
Well, and if we think back along your career, especially in the corpsman field, you probably did that as well.
That was not my objective, but it happened as a result of me pressuring, if you call it pressuring, convince them, just give me a chance.
Right.
Give me a chance. That's all I asked for.
And you proved that you probably exceeded expectations. I'll just say that.
Well, going back to Weber, who owned that radio station KWDM in Des Moines, it came to a point where he came to me and said, "Can I borrow $15? I need to get home and get a sandwich." Because he did not make a lot of money owning that radio station, and it just coincidental that at one of those days he did not have enough money to buy himself a lunch, and he came to me.
Well, what goes around comes around, I think, is how that is that old saying. So,
right.
So what happened? You wanted to become an osteopathic surgeon?
And when I applied, I did the internship in Flint. And then when I graduated from that and wanted to go on into surgery, I put the application in, and they had the blackball. You've heard of the blackball.
Yes.
One member of that department stopped me. At the time, I knew who it was. I don't remember him, and now I kind of pushed him out of my mind. One person stopped me. But then I had a couple of those who did not go along with that, and when I tried to get into a program in another location, then I was back in Detroit. And I went to Arts Center Hospital because there were two notable osteopathic hospitals in the city of Detroit. One was Detroit Osteopathic Hospital, the other was Arts Center. A black could not go in the door as a doctor, an intern, an extern, a surgeon, anything that no doctor, medical practitioner could get into Arts Center as long as Biggs was his name, Ray Biggs, Biggs. Some of those you never will forget.
Right.
He was chairman of the Department of Surgery. And when I was trying to get a surgical residency, and that Detroit Osteopathic Hospital had the reputation for the best surgery residency program in the profession. And when I tried to get in, they said, he will not even look at the application as soon as he found out you're black. But I was able to get into a hospital down the street. Now, that was Detroit Osteopathic. And then there's Arts Center. They had two notable hospitals in the city of Detroit. The guy who was at the chairman of the Department of Surgery at Arts Center, name was Don Randy. He's dead now, by the way. Don Randy was not a racist by any means. He heard of my reputation and what I had been doing in order to get there. And so when I applied, he said to me, I cannot make that decision. We have to go to the old man. The old man was A.C. Johnson, who was the founder, owner of the hospital. We had those in the back in the day. One person. He said, we're going to go to talk to A.C. Johnson. Okay, I'm ready because I want to get this residency. So he took me into A.C. Johnson. A.C. Johnson, as I said to him, Dr. Johnson, I don't want to hear that. I know all I need to know about you. I've read about you. I know what you're doing. I'm going to give you a chance. That's all I needed. Once the old man said it, it was done. He was the father, mother, and all of that of arts in the hospital department and surgery. He had been a surgeon with no formal training. How did you get to be a surgeon? I read surgical books. I would pay surgeons at some of the leading hospitals for me to come in and observe. That was where he got his training.
Some things you couldn't do today.
Right, right. You never could do that today.
No.
With my 9 I have a grandson who is a robotic urological surgeon. I mean, we've gone all the way now. But yeah, that was then. You could not get by with that. He was the answer. And matter of fact, he died in the hospital while I was in my early days on the staff. And I went in to visit him because I would go to see him regularly because he was the one who opened the door for me. Right. He looked up at me and said, God damn it, am I still alive? That was his demeanor.
Uh-huh.
God damn it, I'm still alive. He thought that he could tell God what to do.
Yep, there are people out there like that. So what was your experience like at that hospital?
Here's what Don Rennie said. He was chairman of the Department of Surgery. He said, if we just put you in the regular schedule, he said, you're not going to make it very long. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to sign on as a night house physician. That's about as low as you can get as a doctor in a hospital. So after I had been on, now mind you, if you're a patient in a hospital and you had pain and the only doctor in the hospital happened to be a black doctor, and they don't know that was the only position I could get as long as racism was existing there. But they don't care who it is. They could be a ring-tang tail as long as they can bring me some Demerol or something to stop the pain. So anyway, patients came to depend on me, the only doctor on night duty. This is a small hospital, 150 beds. I was the only night duty doctor. So they all got to know me, got to know who I was, they loved me, they found out they needed me, couldn't do without me. So after 9 months of that, he said, all right, now it's time to go to the old man, go back to him. And he went back, and he was able to explain to him, Anderson has been taking care of all the patients at night, and he knows what he's doing, and they all love him, and we want to give him a chance. Then that's Adam Cullen Johnson then said, okay, we will give him a chance. That opened the door. Don Rennie, chairman of the department. When I finished the residency, 4 years later, he said, I would like for you to join the group. Rennie, Christian, Welch, and Anderson. He gave me a position with the highest ranking group of DO surgeons in the country. Adam Cullen Johnson was on his deathbed, but before he did that, he did open the door. So I was accepted by anybody, everybody in that hospital. So eventually, I became chairman of the department myself. As they would be retiring or relocating, and eventually I was elected to the board of directors of the hospital, and eventually was chairman of the board. So going from excluded because I was black to the highest position you could get in that hospital. Sometimes it's just get your foot in the door so they have a chance to see what you can do before they decide what they do not want you to show. And Don Rennie, he's dead now. He moved out to Arizona in retirement. I don't want to retire. Well, I do. I retired from surgery after 25 years, but I went into medical education, and that's where I think I belong now, to give the next generation of surgeons the opportunity to talk with me, work with me, exclude me, read what I write, kind of thing, once you get there.
Well, and I want to ask you this.
Yes.
How did all of that experience shape how you treat people now that you're in that position, or that when you were in that position as the, on the board of directors and being able to make those decisions?
Well, my objectives from the time I got into medicine was to create an atmosphere whereby they would seek me out. And that was what I considered this is success. When patients come to me, will you do my surgery? I think that's when I can say I have arrived. And did I had a good practice, 20 years. But Randy, Christian, Welch, and Anderson, and mind you, that was 60 or 70 years ago. My starting salary was $40,000 a year. That was more money than many in that day, $40,000 a year. But well, I mean, it was a busy hospital. Arts Center Hospital was a busy hospital, yeah.
All right, so another question I have for you is you stopped doing surgery and you went into education. What was that transition like, and why did you do that?
While I was active in surgery, I ran a program in surgery. So it was nothing transition from one to the other. It was a continuation. Every good leading physician in a hospital is going to be an educator, or they won't be there long. You might have heard of the mayor of the city of Detroit. Before he was that, he was the chief executive officer of Detroit Medical Center. The hospital was doing all right. They had about 6 hospitals in the Detroit Medical Center. But he said that they were not making any money. So he was looking for somebody who could bring in fellowships, residences and fellowships. That's where the money was. So someone told him about me and what I had been able to do at a small hospital in downtown Detroit, Riverview Hospital. So I went to Mike Duggan's office and he says, can you put some postgraduate education programs in this hospital system? And so I had 6 hospitals, Detroit Medical Center. I said, yeah, I can do that. Just give me a chance. So the hospital that I was at, Riverview Hospital, was closing anyway for whatever reason. I think it was a mistake. But anyway, that's another story. But I said, then I can do that because I do know the people to go to get approval for these training programs. So he hired me. 3 or 4 months later, he asked me to come back to his office. His office was down in Hutzel Hospital at the time. And he said, what the hell are you doing? What do you mean, what am I doing? He says, you have taken 150 new resident programs in here in the last 3 or 4 months. Well, isn't that what you wanted? Well, yeah, but I didn't know you could do it so fast. Well, I overwhelmed him with what I was able to do. And Detroit Medical Center all of a sudden is making a hell of a lot of money on postgraduate training. You don't get paid for students now. You have to take them, but you don't get paid for them. When you become residents and fellows, that's when the hospital gets paid.
All right, and so it's important for a hospital to offer those people something, right?
Absolutely.
You're not just going to pick a hospital and go do that.
Hospital has to have a training staff. In other words, the residential program is not going to be approved by either AMA or the airway if you don't have a qualified chairman of that department, program educator. Yeah. I brought both.
So what's the importance to you? I know you said if you're a doctor, you should always be educating, but what's the importance to you about educating these young doctors that are up and coming now?
If nothing else, let me tell you, in my immediate family, while there were none when I entered medicine, today there are 10 in my immediate family. Does that say anything?
It's quite a legacy.
Yes, and I don't believe that you can have that many walking in my footsteps if there was not value that they could see. So now I have 3 or 4 OB-GYNs, got a couple of surgeons, and this robotic, he's going beyond me. I never knew anything, such a thing as a robotic urological surgeon, and he's at DMC. So I'm saying that sometimes you set an example even for your own children, your own family. things that they did not have any idea they could do. Ask me what I thought that my parents could do to help me with. My mother was an educator, teaching in elementary school. My father was an insurance man. I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to be a doctor. Then I wanted to be a surgeon.
Well, I want to ask you this question, and not in that hokey sense that sometimes people ask these questions, but really, why did you want to become a doctor? Why did you have that drive to become a doctor? What was it?
I did sense when I was growing up, there's not a single black doctor in this town, and there was a need. I sensed that even when I was 6 years old. We did not have a black doctor, and white doctors may see you coming in their back door after hours, but that was the extent of it. They didn't make house calls. So I'm saying that I sensed that when I was a teenager, so much so that they gave me, in the back of the house, there was a garage, there was a workshop, there was a brooder, there was a laundry, all that in a row. My mother gave me a block of that, and she would tell the neighbors, watch out for your cats and dogs and chickens, because my son is practicing to become a doctor. Had no idea he would ever get there, certainly not as a surgeon. But she told them, ever since she had known me, I've always indicated that I want to become a doctor. How did that get in my blood? I don't know, because there has not been a doctor in my family. But how know? God works in mysterious ways. Let me say the rest of that.
Yes.
Wonders to perform. He plants his feet upon the waves and rides on every storm. So I had to ride on some storms. I had many doors shut in my face. I was denied access to training programs that I thought were good, only because I was black. I sensed that even as a 12-year-old. And I think also, when I speak of God, I don't mean a universal God. Everybody has the same God that worships. No. I think if you don't have some original ideas in your mind, something is missing. And I don't know how I got to the point where when I was 6 years old, I was telling people I want to be a doctor. You out of your mind, there's no doctor in the history of your family ever. And besides that, you're black and no doctor black ever in your household, in your neighborhood, in your city. So I cannot say why it is I wanted to go beyond that. Or why did I elect to volunteer for the Navy as opposed to the Army? I couldn't get in the Air Force. I think Air Force might have been my first choice, but a black could not be a pilot in the Army then. So that's why we have the 99th Pursuit Squadron in Tuskegee. And guess what? Tuskegee Airmen, where they trained, where they flew out of there, and they were in a pursuit squadron. And it is my very well-based knowledge that when there was a bomber, now bombers are not maneuverable. They can't move quick moves. When bombers, a black pilot could not be the pilot on a bomber. But those who were the pilots on the bombers would request those black pilots from the pursuit squadron in Tuskegee be our escort. History would tell you they never lost a plane as long as the 99th Pursuit Squadron was protecting those planes. They never lost a plane.
We talk about the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yes.
We talk about the work that they did. We talk about the work that you did as a doctor.
Uh-huh.
And so we talked about the importance of having a black doctor back when there were no black doctors, right?
Right.
Because patients couldn't get in to see a doctor if they were black unless they were coming in after hours or
and the
through
back
the
door.
Yes.
Yeah, they couldn't even sit with the other patients.
Right.
Yes.
So what's the importance today then of having qualified black doctors?
They have a choice. There are still blacks who feel as though in order for you to take care of my ills, you got to be white, trained at Harvard. There are still some like that. That is notwithstanding the fact that there are now black doctors at all levels in the medical field. there are, in addition to being 3 or 4 predominantly black medical schools, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all that have medical schools, you'll find black faculty members as well as black students. So I'm saying that it has taken a century to integrate the field of medicine, but it is happening. It is happening.
I think it's important.
Right. And of course, I say too that a black patient needs to see that there is a black doctor doing what I need done and has a reputation of being as good as, if not better than, any other doctor in my area. They need to see that. And so I'm somewhat disappointed. On the other hand, I'm very pleased. Michigan State was possibly the first college or university in the United States to have a whole program, 20 years of the progress from slavery to freedom. And the dean of the College of Osteopathic Medicine at Michigan State selected me, and he gave me a free hand, whatever you need. Some of the speakers I brought, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. And when the staff would contact him, and he'd come to me and say, wait a minute, we can get Harold Belafonte, but he wants $20,000. I say, well, let me check with the dean. Or you can go and ask the dean. And dean would say, is that what Anderson wants? Yeah, do it. I don't know of another college that would give somebody like me, from the pits that I came from in Maracus, Georgia, a free hand to have a 20-year program bringing distinguished leaders of the civil rights movement in the United States to campus. It would be of value. We can get to you the names and the credentials of every speaker I've had for 20 years. That's available. And it only happened because of the dean of the College of Osteopathic Medicine, and it's not happening anywhere else in the United States. There are those who sense if we're going to be what we purport to be, a free and open society with equal opportunity to everybody, you need to know answers to some of the questions that you raise. How did you get to do X, Y, Z? And without exception, every time you've asked me that question, I will say to you, here's who opened the door. In other words, it doesn't happen by a change in the Constitution or laws. No. There's usually, Don Manning was the person at Arson Hospital that let me come there as a resident and then offer me a job at the end of the residency. It was John B. Shoemaker who let me come into Des Moines College when there were no blacks in there. He opened the door for me. So I'm saying that don't look at a person and judge them by how they look or where they come from. If you look hard enough, in most places now, you're going to find at least one champion who will say, give him a chance. Give him a chance. I was fortunate enough to have somebody in those places that I mentioned, somebody, and sometimes it's people like the Gilchrist Funeral Home in Montgomery, Alabama. They never had anybody like me in there. And this owner, he said to me, go out there to the college and get your schedule, come back here, and then we will let you work around your schedule. How many people will be looking for that? I'll work when I can, when I'm not in class, and he let me do that.
Well, the whole story here, I think, just to put a fine point on it, the whole story here is just give me a chance.
Give me a chance.
And I could do it. Now, you said, about midway through our conversation, you said success is really when people seek you out because of the knowledge that you have. So I want to ask you two questions as we close this out. So the first question is, are you successful?
Absolutely. I have met every goal that I set for myself, and I consider that success.
And second of all, as we know, people will be listening to this long after you and I are both gone from this earth. And so I'm just wondering, what message would you leave people as we close out our conversation today?
Do not be discouraged by a history that will hound you throughout your life. That history says because you're black, because you're male, because you're female, any other thing that they say, this is why you will never be success, ignore that and pursue your goals and your ambitions, notwithstanding those who will say, you never can, you never will, that is not for you. Do not accept that.
To listen to this full story or to hear the stories of other veterans, go to www.veteransarchives.org and click on the Media tab.